Hello everybody, I am the Monarch of Dragons, and welcome to a little impressions video. I normally don't do these for stuff and monsters, but for this one I thought it would be a special case since, you know, the whole third beta revolves practically around him. He's the flagship of the game and a pretty important monster in the story, so hey, may as well share my thoughts and my impressions on him, you know, because I just recently fought him, I beat him, and as the moment, I'm actually uploading a video on my first and successful attempt on it. So, yeah, let's talk about Nergigante, shall we? Okay. So I may as well start about, what I think about its design. It's, a lot of people before this whole beta kept on saying how over-designed or edgy Nergigante is, like as if it's a Frontier monster. And honestly, I wouldn't make that comparison. Frontier just kind of has spikes and all these overcomplicated designs just for the sake of it. So like, I mean, this image right here shows exactly what Nergigante would look like if it wasn't actually in Frontier, and you get what I mean, because, you know, in Frontier they added all these spikes and horns and all these things onto the monster, and it just doesn't look natural. And, you know, Frontier's so over-dramatic and over-the-top that it's weird to make a comparison and say Nergigante looks out of place, because honestly, I don't think it does look out of place. I think it fits right along in world because, despite being very edgy in terms of design, as some people would say, there's a reason behind it, and I think it fits well into the monster's ecology and, like, the world itself, you know? The fact of how it is a regeneration factor, so it repairs its wounds by creating these spikes that start to heal over time and harden, becoming new scales for it to use, that explode and shatter when it uses various attacks, such as dive bomb. Because, you know, it all makes sense, whereas with Frontier, it's just adding spikes just for the sake of spikes, whereas with here, it's part of the monster's life. And honestly, I can really appreciate Capcom for doing that. And, you know, he may be a simplistic monster in terms of design, like, he shares the same skeleton as Gormagala and Volfalk, and, you know, I think that's just fine. Honestly, because they do a ton of stuff different with him than Gormagala, and they make him unique enough to a point where he can stand out. I mean, there's a reason he's a flagship of the game. So, yeah, in terms of design, I like it. Battle, okay, this was hard for me. Let me just say this right now. The Nergigante battle was one of the toughest I've faced. Like, I know I haven't played Monster for the longest of times, compared to other people in the community who have played since like the first game or second. I don't know, I haven't played for the longest, but even with my experience for the series from try onwards, this was definitely one of the most challenging fights for me, because it's always something about fighting a monster for the first time that you know next to nothing about. You know, trying to work out its mechanics, how it works, how to find an opening to attack, and knowing when to get out of dodge. Like, that whole process about the Nergigante fight, it was hard, it was a struggle even to begin to try and comprehend his attack patterns, because a lot of times it just seemed like that he would turn around and just simply attack or run over me immediately. And there are certainly tells to the attacks. I mean, frickin' the dive bomb, though it has a short window to respond to with the Superman dive, it has a clear tail. He roars, he goes into the sky, and then he dive bombs. Same with the tail. He kind of looks back, and then he slams his tail into the ground and hits anybody who's near it. So there are clearly tells to Nergigante, but for me personally, it was a struggle trying to figure them out, but, you know, it was definitely a challenging and rewarding fight. I might as well talk about its main mechanic, which, as I've said before, is the regenerating spikes. As you deal damage and as it attacks, it will start creating these little white spikes on its arms and its body, and they can appear anywhere on its body, from its tail, the forearms, the head, the wings, anywhere. Anywhere you can attack or where it attacks with, it can regenerate those spikes, and it's important to get rid of those spikes as soon as you can, because over time they start hardening until they're completely black, to the point where they are impervious and your weapon just completely bounces off. But the more stressful thing to the spikes, besides armor, is that it also provides more AoE for some of his attacks. Things like his Claw Slam and especially his Dive Bomb gain more range and get a little sort of AoE around them. Like, normally with the Claw Slam, it's just a little slam, that's it. But with the spikes added onto the forearms, all of a sudden there's now a AoE explosion of spikes that generate around the arm that you have to look out for. So even if you dodge the Claw Stomp, you still have to be careful about the spike explosion, and they deal a lot of damage, especially the Dive Bomb. That's practically like a one-hit KO if you get hit by it. So, the more spikes there are on Nergigante, the more powerful it becomes. And so the battle basically becomes a speed trial to see how fast you can lay the damage on that part of the body and get rid of those spikes, because, trust me, you want to get rid of those spikes. You do not want to leave them hanging. You won't be able to get rid of every one of them, but it's definitely necessary to try and get rid of as many as you can. Otherwise, you're going to have a harder time with breaking parts of the body and cutting them, and just generally having a tough time with his attacks. That was definitely the hardest part about the battle for me, trying to work out his mechanics and how to counter it. Because with the weapon I used, Longsword, I mostly stuck to the back legs, and I didn't know how the regeneration mechanic worked. I knew it was there, but I didn't know how to counter it or how to properly work against it, so that led to a multitude of deaths for me, where I target the wrong place of the body, don't deal with the spikes, and try to target the head, for example, when it's already hardened. And, you know, that was definitely the hardest part of the battle for me. But, it never felt unfair to me. I'll say that, despite being a really challenging monster, it never felt unfair, and I'm going to draw a comparison to a monster that a lot of people like, and I know I'm going to get hate for this, but whatever, it's just me talking. Compared to a monster like Regine, I felt that Nergigante was completely fair in its mechanics and its battle. I've always kind of hated the Regine. I mean, it's not my least favorite monster, but it's definitely up there with, like, one of the monsters that I have the toughest of times dealing with, and I just generally don't like the battle. And it mostly has to do with how the battle works, because a lot of people praise it for, like, a fast-paced, hard battle, and, okay, it's true, there's some openings for counters and stuff, but how do I describe it? It's like there's the window's small. Like, the window between attacks for Regine is tiny, and the fact of how it has this small of a body type, and it can move this fast, makes the problem all the worse, because, you know, you'll be trying to hit it, and then, because its body is so small, its attacks cover such a wide range, that you'll most likely get hit in the middle of a combo when you're trying to attack it, or even worse, completely miss it. And then there's the fact of its frickin' armor, and how it just completely comes out of nowhere, and its arms have a large hurt box. Like, most of the time, that's what's taking the damage, and so when the arms get that armor, you're basically practically bouncing off his body every time, unless if you have Mind's Eye, or just so happen to hit that small little box that you can actually hit without bouncing off. And it becomes a nightmare, especially for, like, people who try to target the front. And, you know, plus there's the fact that he is basically Super Saiyan mode and can use lightning for some reason. I get it, it's ecology and stuff, it eats Kirins, but like, the fact that Regine, like, to me personally, Nergigante is a better Regine, and that's a bold statement to make, I know, but for me personally, it felt like that the mechanics and what was introduced in Nergigante battle wasn't introduced just for the sake of making it harder. Like, I think, personally, Regine is just a monster with its mechanics and stuff introduced just to make it harder. Like, for me personally, the most important factor about a hunt for me is fun. If I can have fun, then I can forgive the monster in some of its aspects that may be worse and stuff. Like, I look for the fun of a fight most of all. And Regine is just my joy killer. Like, I have no fun with him whatsoever. And, you know, despite being a challenging fight, Nergigante proved to be fun for me because its mechanics and its regeneration was actually built into the battle, how it worked. And unlike Regine's armor, there was a way you could actually counter Nergigante's armor. What I hate most is the fact of, like, if a monster introduces a mechanic and there's nothing you can do about it other than wait, or get a skill to completely negate it. Like, I get it, you can use Mind's Eye to get through the super armor, but that just makes the problem even worse for me. The fact that you have to get a skill just to negate the issue makes the problem even bigger. And with Regine, you just basically have to wait for the super armor to die down or get Mind's Eye. Whereas with Nergigante, you could actually do something about it. You can stop and halt the progression of the regeneration, and even stop the spikes from regenerating completely. You can basically counter this monster's strategy. Whereas with Regine, it's just, oh, you have to put up with it now. I don't know, it's just like, for me personally, Regine represents the wrong kind of challenge, whereas with Nergigante, it's a fair challenge. Like, I don't know if I'm expressing my, what I think in the most clearest of ways, and I know there's going to be a lot of disagreement with me with my statement, and fine, whatever. It's just, I personally do not like Regine. It is one of my least favorite monsters, and Nergigante just felt like a better Regine to me. So, yeah, that was kind of a whole part of the battle that I felt I needed to talk to, if it may have felt forced and off topic for me to talk about Regine, because in a similar fashion, its battle felt like a lot like Regine. Like, it's a monster that hits hard, it's fast, it's furious, it's relentless, and I just found Nergigante's battle more enjoyable and more fun. That's the key word, fun. I actually had fun trying to learn about its mechanics and countering it, and, you know, it provided me with a really good challenge and a learning curve that I definitely need to get around. And, also talk about this, the fact of how Nergigante is an Elder Dragon that doesn't rely on any elemental bullcrap, okay? It's got the regeneration mechanic, and that's what makes it stand out. But for me personally, it's really nice to have a monster, an Elder Dragon especially, that has no statuses, no elements. Like with a lot of the Elder Dragons, they have something that makes them hard. Like with Teostra, it has Blast Blight and explosions it can inflict on you. With Kushala, Wind Barrier, that basically makes it necessary to either mount the monster or to have a poison weapon always to counter it. And then Chameleos is just poison spam, even if I really like Chameleos. But you see what I mean? There's always like a mechanic or element or status that the monster that the Elder Dragon can inflict that somehow makes it harder. Whereas with Nergigante, it's just brute force. It's a brute. It's a berserker. It's a barbarian, which is especially portrayed in its armor and how demonic and barbarian looking it is. And I can really appreciate that. It's really unique that they would have a monster with just no status elements, no elements, nothing. It's just brute force along with its regeneration mechanic. And the regeneration mechanic plays a part in its aggressiveness, and I just love it. Like, finally we get a pure savage, like a monster that just brute force, nothing else, and it really portrays that in its battle style Last thing I may as well talk about was its battle theme, because I actually completely didn't expect the battle theme to be that. You know, it played during one of the trailers, the one with Tobi Gadachi and Paolumu in it, and I didn't expect this to be its music, but I honestly really like it. World has definitely a meh soundtrack to me. I think a lot of people are over-exaggerating it when it comes to, like, saying it's the worst. I mean, do I admit it's probably one of the weakest in the series? Yeah, true. But there definitely is some highlights in there, such as the main theme song, Among the Stars, and then there's this theme. Like, it perfectly encapsulates how frantic this battle is. Like, you have to be fast, it's fast, you have to be aggressive, and it's aggressive. It's a really fast-paced battle, and the music encapsulates that. Even if it doesn't sound terrifying or like what some people may have wanted, I still like it. It's definitely not my favorite theme in the world, but, you know, it fits well with the battle, and I like it. It's definitely one of the better tracks in the world, and that's basically it. Ugh. Okay, 17-minute ramble for just one monster. What the heck? So, anyway, that has been me talking about Nergigante, my impressions on him, and what I've overall thought about him. Overall, he's a really interesting monster, and I definitely think he's one of my favorites among the cast of World now. Like, before, I was more concerned about Zora Magdaros and just my favorites, but now, after fighting Nergigante, I can definitely say he's one of my favorites. So, yeah, just the challenge, the fun factor, the learning curve, the mechanics, everything about him was really good. And, you know, I look forward to fighting him in the main game and seeing what role in the story he's going to have. You know, I definitely think he is worthy of the flagship title and of being an Elder Dragon. So, with all that said, I want to know what you guys think. Were you able to fight Nergigante in the beta? Were you able to beat him? And I want to know what you guys thought of him. Did you think he was a good monster? Was he hard for you? Or was he just kind of meh or bad? And do you agree on any of the points I made? And I definitely know that what I said about Rosane is going to be controversial, especially when a lot of people like him, but oh well, just let me know what you guys think. And hey, if you're new to the channel, why not subscribe, like, favorites, or share, blah blah blah, stuttering, because, you know, YouTube has deemed this whole monetization program, and I'm gonna get kicked out of it if I don't reach the guidelines by February 20th, so that's gonna be stressful. But hey, we're at 600 subs, I think we can make it. So anything you guys do to help support this channel and the content I make means a lot, especially in this rough of times. And, you know, I deeply appreciate all your guys' support. And if you're really feeling it in terms of just channel and my content and me, I guess, you can check out my Twitter and Discord in the link description below. You know, because if you want to hunt with me or off camera or just privately, then you can check out my Discord and stuff. And with all that being said, this has been my impressions on Nergigante. I am the Monarch of Dragons. Sign out. Have a fantastic day or night, wherever you guys live. Peace.